Hello, esteemed gentlemen. Power is never seized by those who want it the most. It's surrendered to those who need it the least. History proves this with unsettling precision. In every era, the figures who shaped nations, movements, and revolutions weren't always the ones clawing for the throne. More often, they were the outsiders, the ones who seemed too detached to care about control. Yet somehow, everyone ended up following them. And that's where the Sigma male enters the picture. Unlike the alpha who campaigns for attention like a politician kissing babies, the Sigma doesn't audition for leadership. He doesn't draft speeches, rally troops, or hand out motivational posters. He just exists in a way that makes hierarchy look outdated. And in that quiet rebellion, people start gravitating to him. Not because he asked, but because deep down, they trust the man who doesn't need to be trusted. It's almost unfair, really. While others sweat over team-building exercises that feel like forced therapy sessions, the Sigma simply moves to his own rhythm. And before anyone realizes it, the entire room is moving with him. This isn't about charisma, mystery, or playing cool. It's about a man who leads by not leading, who dominates without declaring dominance. And by the end of this, you'll see exactly why Sigma males never try to lead, but end up leading everyone anyway. Number 1. They refuse to play popularity politics. Most people who fight for leadership spend half their lives trapped in a game of approval. They try to be liked, nod along to whatever the crowd wants, and adjust their tone so no one gets offended. It looks smart on the surface. After all, who wouldn't want a leader everyone loves? But beneath it, you see the cracks. People sense the constant need for validation, the nervous eyes scanning the room to check if every word landed. That's not strength, it's people-pleasing in disguise. Sigma males refuse to play that game. They don't crave applause, and they're not interested in collecting fans like trophies. To them, leadership isn't a popularity contest. It's about getting things done. They would rather be respected for their clarity than liked for their diplomacy. And that's exactly why people end up following them. Their bluntness may ruffle feathers at first, but it cuts through the nonsense. It tells everyone, here's a person who won't lie just to be liked. That honesty is rare. It's disarming. In a world where most leaders bend with the wind, the Sigma stays rooted. He doesn't care if his decisions upset half the room because he knows strength isn't built on sugarcoating. And people, even those who roll their eyes at him, begin to recognize something deeper. This is someone who can be trusted when it matters. Ironically, the very thing that makes him seem cold or difficult is what gives him influence. When others avoid tough calls for fear of being disliked, the Sigma makes them without hesitation. That decisiveness becomes magnetic. Even those who disagree can't help but respect the consistency. Over time, people grow tired of being catered to and start gravitating toward the one person who doesn't play favorites, doesn't pander, and doesn't chase anyone's approval. So while traditional leaders burn energy trying to keep everyone smiling, the Sigma quietly earns loyalty by being unapologetically himself. He doesn't want followers, yet people follow him anyway. Because deep down, most would rather walk behind someone who doesn't need them than someone desperate to keep them. That difference is why Sigma males never try to lead, but still end up leading everyone. Number 2, they're the silent benchmark. Every group has an unspoken measuring stick. People rarely admit it, but they're constantly comparing themselves to someone, checking if they're working as hard, staying as calm, or producing as much. With Sigma males, that comparison happens automatically. They don't push it, they don't announce it, and they definitely don't ask for it. But their way of carrying themselves, their ability to stay composed under pressure, and the way they get things done without noise makes them the silent benchmark everyone else starts measuring against. This kind of influence is more powerful than loud commands or flashy speeches because it works beneath the surface. People don't even realize they're aligning themselves to the Sigma's standard until they catch themselves thinking, would I have handled that as smoothly? That's when leadership shifts quietly. It's not about titles or authority. It's about becoming the model everyone else unconsciously copies. The Sigma doesn't set out to prove anything. He doesn't parade his achievements or demand recognition. What sets him apart is that his results speak louder than any self-promotion ever could. Others who spend their time selling themselves can't compete with the effortless credibility that comes from just being effective. Over time, this turns the Sigma into a living example of what others want to reach, even if they'd never admit it out loud. The danger for traditional leaders is that this kind of influence can't be controlled. You can't regulate respect that grows from quiet consistency. You can't block admiration that comes from watching someone succeed without fanfare. People simply drift toward it, abandoning those who shout the loudest but achieve the least. What makes this even more striking is that the Sigma never asks anyone to follow. He doesn't encourage comparisons or push others to meet his standards. He just exists in his own lane, and that very detachment makes his standard more powerful. It's one thing to follow someone begging for attention. It's another to follow someone who doesn't even notice if you're there. That's why the Sigma becomes the silent benchmark. Without ever trying, he sets the bar higher, and sooner or later, everyone else adjusts themselves to his level. That's not just leadership. That's dominance without a crown. Number 3, they're the first to abandon consensus theater. Consensus looks good on paper. Everyone nodding, everyone agreeing, everyone pretending to be on the same page, but most of the time, it's theater. People aren't actually agreeing, they're just tired of standing out, scared of being disliked, or too invested in keeping the peace. That's why alphas thrive there. They love the show of pulling everyone together, rallying with big speeches, and selling the illusion that unity equals strength. It feeds their ego and keeps their position secure. The Sigma male wants no part of it. He sees straight through the performance and walks away without hesitation. He doesn't care if he looks stubborn, antisocial, or even difficult, because to him, playing along in fake harmony is the real weakness. And that's where the shift happens. When someone refuses to join the act, the entire stage feels exposed. The applause for consensus suddenly sounds hollow when one person calmly opts out. That refusal has power because it's rare. Most people are conditioned to seek validation and avoid conflict. So when a Sigma rejects consensus, it doesn't come off as rebellion for its own sake. It reads as honesty. Others may not admit it immediately, but they feel it. They sense that the Sigma isn't playing for approval. He's standing on conviction. And in a world where everyone else bends, conviction is magnetic. This doesn't mean people always like it. In fact, some resent it at first. But as time passes, more and more start to see his stance as the only real one in the room. They realize that pretending to agree just delays truth, while the Sigma's refusal forces clarity. Slowly the crowd drifts toward him, not because he begged for support, but because his way looks less fake and more solid than the carefully staged unity around them. That's why he ends up leading without trying. By stepping out of the play, he pulls the curtain back on everyone else. The moment he abandons consensus theater, he turns the spotlight on authenticity, and sooner or later people prefer following the one who walked away from the act over those still stuck performing it. Number 4, they redefine the game instead of playing it. Most people spend their lives competing on pre-built playing fields. They fight for promotions, titles, and recognition inside systems that were designed long before they arrived. That's why climbing the ladder becomes the ultimate obsession. Get to the top and you win. But Sigmas look at that ladder and see a trap. To them, it's not a path upward, it's a cage. Even if you make it to the top, you're still stuck inside someone else's design. That realization makes them refuse the climb altogether. Instead of wasting energy on competing where everyone else competes, they create something new. It might be a way of working, a different structure of living, or a personal system of values that doesn't need external approval. And here's the irony. The very people who once mocked or resisted that breakaway approach end up copying it. What started as rejection of the game becomes the new game everyone plays. That's how the Sigma turns into a leader without ever raising his hand. The strength in this approach is that it doesn't rely on traditional recognition. Alphas need the ladder because the ladder validates them. Sigmas don't need it, so they build on their own terms. And when others notice that his system produces better results, more freedom, and less noise, they naturally migrate to it. It isn't loyalty he asked for. It's loyalty earned because people would rather follow something that works than something that merely looks official. This is why Sigmas end up leading even when they don't try. They're not chasing trophies, applause, or top positions within existing frameworks. They're rewriting the frameworks themselves. And once the crowd realizes the old rules are clunky and outdated, the Sigma's way quietly becomes the standard. Suddenly, everyone's climbing a new ladder without realizing he was the one who built it. Leadership by invention will always outlast leadership by competition. Sigmas know this instinctively. The smartest way to win is to make the rules irrelevant. That's why they never beg for power. They simply change the game until the world has no choice but to follow. Number 5. They create standards, not slogans. Most leaders love big declarations. They plaster walls with slogans about teamwork, loyalty, or innovation. They hold speeches filled with buzzwords that sound inspiring but dissolve the moment the room empties. It feels good in the moment, but everyone knows deep down that slogans don't build trust. Actions do. That's where Sigma males separate themselves completely. They don't waste time preaching about values, they live them. When a Sigma commits to something, it shows in the way he works, in the consistency of his decisions, and in the discipline of his daily actions. He doesn't announce integrity, but people see he won't bend just because it's convenient. He doesn't brag about focus, but his results prove it. That silent embodiment of principles makes more impact than any poster or pep talk ever could. It's not about noise, it's about proof. And proof is the strongest persuader. This is why people end up following Sigmas without being asked. In a world full of leaders who say one thing and do another, the Sigma doesn't have to convince anyone. His example convinces for him. People notice that when they align with his way of doing things, progress happens faster and cleaner. It's not about charm or emotional manipulation, it's about cause and effect. His path works, and that's enough to attract others. There's also an unspoken relief in this. Most people are exhausted by empty speeches and fake enthusiasm. They don't want more slogans about unity or excellence. They want someone who proves those things without theatrics. The Sigma provides that relief by quietly setting a standard that everyone else feels compelled to meet. The irony is that his silence makes his influence louder. Because he doesn't shove his values in anyone's face, people lean in to watch closer. They study his choices, measure themselves against his results, and without realizing it, adopt his standards as their own. That's real leadership. Not hype, not slogans, not empty promises. Just living in a way that forces others to step up if they want to keep up. And that's why Sigmas never try to lead but still end up leading everyone. Number 6. People follow certainty, not authority. Most leaders rely on their title to command respect. They lean on authority, rank, or status symbols to keep people in line. But the truth is, authority alone doesn't inspire loyalty. What people really follow, what they trust, is certainty. In moments of confusion or pressure, they don't care who has the badge or the title. They care who seems to actually know where they're going. This is where Sigma males stand apart. They carry an unshakable conviction in their choices, and it shows in the way they move. They don't fumble for approval or second-guess themselves to keep the peace. They decide, they act, and they own the outcome, even if it's unpopular. That level of clarity is magnetic in a world where most so-called leaders panic at the first sign of disagreement. People see the Sigma holding steady while everyone else wavers, and their instincts tell them, this is the one I can trust when it gets rough. It's not about arrogance. The Sigma doesn't act certain to look powerful. He's certain because he's done the thinking beforehand. While others get lost in endless debates and watered-down compromises, the Sigma has already stripped the situation to its core and made peace with his decision. That inner conviction creates a presence that doesn't need to shout. People feel it. They see it in his tone, his actions, even his silences. And the irony is, even those who disagree often end up following anyway. Why? Because in times of uncertainty, clarity beats popularity every single time. A shaky leader who tries to please everyone spreads doubt like a virus. But a Sigma, standing firm in his conviction, gives people something solid to hold on to. That's how he ends up leading without trying. He doesn't campaign for followers or lean on titles. His certainty makes him the anchor in a storm, and human nature pulls people toward stability. Authority can be given and taken away, but certainty, that can't be faked. And that's why people follow the Sigma male, even when he never asked them to. Number 7. They don't manage ego traffic jams. Traditional leaders often end up as referees in an endless game of clashing egos. One person feels overlooked, another feels threatened, someone else demands recognition. The leader spends half their energy smoothing over these little power struggles just to keep the group moving. It looks like management, but most of the time it's babysitting, and the more attention those egos get, the louder they become. Sigma males don't play that role. They don't waste time balancing insecurities or feeding fragile pride. If someone wants to compete for attention, they let them. If people want to clash, they let them burn energy on it. The Sigma refuses to jump into the traffic jam of egos because he knows it leads nowhere. And here's the twist. That refusal changes the entire dynamic. When the Sigma doesn't fuel the noise starts to feel pointless. People notice that he's not reacting, not adjusting himself to match their ego games, not handing out validation like tokens. Instead, he remains steady, focused, and calm, as if the chaos has nothing to do with him. That calmness creates a strange pull. While others get stuck fighting for scraps of recognition, the Sigma quietly becomes the center everyone orbits around because he isn't trapped in the same petty cycle. This shift happens subtly. The ones fighting for dominance eventually realize their efforts feel childish in his presence. Their loudness shrinks against his stillness. And without him saying a word, they start dropping the games and aligning themselves to his pace. It's not because he demanded control, it's because he made the battle irrelevant. That's real influence. Not by juggling egos, not by handing out comfort, but by refusing to participate in the performance altogether. The Sigma shows that power doesn't belong to the loudest voice, but to the one who doesn't need to fight for it. And that lesson forces people to recalibrate themselves around him. So while traditional leaders burn out managing ego traffic jams, the Sigma clears the road without lifting a finger. His refusal to play the game makes everyone else abandon it, and in doing so, they end up following him. Number 8. They control rhythm, not people. Most leaders try to control people directly. They give orders, push agendas, and constantly remind everyone who's in charge. But the harder they push, the more resistance they create. People comply on the surface, yet underneath they're frustrated, drained, or quietly rebelling. Sigma males bypass that problem completely. They don't waste effort trying to micromanage others. Instead, they control something far more powerful: the rhythm. A Sigma has an instinct for pace. In conversations, he decides when to speak and when to stay silent. And that timing pulls others into his flow. In decision-making, he doesn't rush to keep up with the group's panic or stall to avoid responsibility. He moves at his own speed, and gradually, without noticing, everyone else starts adjusting to him. People match his tone, his timing, his tempo because the steadiness feels more natural than the chaos they were in before. That's invisible dominance. It's not forced, it's gravitational. The Sigma doesn't announce that he's setting the rhythm, but others feel it. The way he pauses makes people pause. The way he moves forward makes people follow. Even those who think they're leading often end up syncing with him because his rhythm is calmer, sharper, and more grounded than theirs. This kind of influence is stronger than direct control. When someone forces you to obey, you resist, but when someone controls the pace, you don't even realize you're adjusting. It feels like the natural order of things. That's why Sigmas end up leading without trying. They turn leadership into rhythm setting, not people pushing. Over time, this becomes obvious. The group's energy doesn't follow the loudest person. It follows the Sigma's steady beat. He doesn't have to argue, persuade, or demand anything. By simply holding his pace, he resets the environment around him. People fall in line not because they were told to, but because they can't help it. That's the kind of leadership no title can buy. By controlling rhythm instead of people, the Sigma doesn't just lead. He rewires the entire flow of the room. And the most striking part is, he does it without saying a word about leadership at all. Number 9. They treat leadership like a side effect, not a goal. Most people chase leadership like it's a trophy. They want the recognition, the spotlight, the sense of being above others. But chasing leadership always comes with strings attached. People start questioning motives. Is he making this choice because it's right, or because it makes him look good? That doubt poisons trust no matter how polished the leader's image looks. Sigmas flip this upside down. They don't see leadership as a reward, they see it as weight. The attention, the expectations, the responsibility for others' mistakes, none of that appeals to them. To them, real freedom lies in doing what works, not in carrying the burden of managing egos and maintaining appearances. And because they don't treat leadership like a prize to show off, they accidentally become the one everyone trusts the most. That trust comes from the absence of hidden agendas. People can sense when someone is chasing power for ego's sake. It seeps out in their decisions, their fake charm, their endless need to be seen as in charge. With the Sigma, none of that is present. He makes choices because he believes in them, not because they boost his status. That clarity makes people relax around him. They don't feel manipulated, they feel grounded. Ironically, this detachment gives him more influence than those who beg for it. When someone tries hard to lead, people instinctively pull back, testing their sincerity. But when someone doesn't want the role, and still ends up shaping the direction of things, people lean in closer. It feels safer, more genuine, more real. Over time, his refusal to chase leadership makes him the natural anchor. People follow him not because he demanded it, but because he's the only one who seems uninterested in exploiting them. And in a world full of leaders addicted to control, that absence of hunger for power is the rarest and most magnetic quality of all. That's why Sigmas end up with influence they never asked for. By treating leadership like a side effect rather than a goal, they turn the very thing they avoided into something they quietly dominate. Number 10. They're masters at withholding energy. Most people waste energy trying to prove themselves. They speak louder, move faster, and constantly push to be noticed. It's a constant display. Like they're afraid that if they stop for even a second, someone else will take their place. The Sigma male doesn't bother with that performance. Instead, he does something far more powerful. He withholds. He doesn't rush to fill every silence. He doesn't compete for attention in crowded rooms. He doesn't hand out his focus like free samples. His energy is scarce by design, and scarcity always creates value. The less he gives away, the more people want it. They start leaning in, paying closer attention, waiting for him to act or speak. Suddenly, the person who invested the least energy becomes the one everyone else invests their energy in. This is the paradox of the Sigma's presence. By holding back, he creates demand. People don't just want his approval. They want to understand his thinking, to see if they can earn even a fraction of his attention. That quiet restraint creates a gravitational pull stronger than any loud performance of confidence. What makes it work is that it's not a trick. Sigmas aren't pretending to be scarce. They truly don't feel the need to scatter their energy. They guard it, conserve it, and use it with precision. And when they finally decide to engage, the weight of that moment hits harder than anything said by those who never shut up. One glance, one decision, one comment. It carries 10 times the impact because it's rare. That's why people end up rallying around them. The Sigma doesn't campaign for leadership or chase attention. Instead, others chase him. In a world full of noise and endless self-promotion, his restraint feels like discipline, like strength, like control. And people instinctively trust those who don't need to spend every second proving themselves. By mastering the art of withholding energy, the Sigma doesn't just stand apart. He becomes the silent center of gravity. Before anyone realizes it, he's leading the room, not because he demanded attention, but because everyone else gave it to him freely. Number 11. They see power as transactional, not personal. Most leaders treat power like a personal trophy. They wear it like a crown, obsess over being saluted, and soak up the feeling of being above others. But that approach blinds them. It makes them emotional about power, defensive when challenged, and addicted to the glow of authority. Sigmas don't fall for that trap. They strip the romance out of power and see it for what it really is, a transaction. To the Sigma, Power isn't about who looks strongest or who gets the most attention. It's about how influence moves between people, how decisions ripple through a system, and how leverage is created and lost. He studies it like mechanics, cold, precise, and impersonal. Who needs who? Who depends on what? Who has options and who doesn't? Once he understands the flow, he can move within it effortlessly, like someone who's memorized the gears of a machine. That detachment is what makes him dangerous. While others get caught up in pride and ego, he's focused on outcomes. If stepping back gets him more leverage, he steps back. If letting someone else take the spotlight secures his position, he lets them. It's never about being seen as powerful. It's about actually steering what happens. The result is influence that feels almost invisible. People don't notice him grabbing control because he never waves it in their faces. But when choices get made, when directions shift, it becomes clear he was shaping things all along. By the time others realize it, the game has already tilted in his favor. And the irony is, because he doesn't cling to power as an identity, he can't be manipulated the way traditional leaders can. You can't shame him into defending his title because he doesn't care about titles. You can't bait him with recognition, because recognition means nothing without leverage. That makes him far harder to topple than leaders who base their entire sense of worth on being in charge. By seeing power as transactional instead of personal, the Sigma sidesteps the vanity and politics that drain most leaders. He doesn't need to play the boss role. He just learns the system so well that everyone ends up moving to his design, whether they know it or not. Number 12. They reject the babysitter role. Most leaders eventually slip into the role of caretaker. They spend their days managing not just tasks, but feelings, smoothing over insecurities, giving endless pep talks, and making sure everyone feels heard. It looks noble on the surface, but it drains their energy and turns leadership into glorified babysitting. People become dependent instead of capable, waiting for reassurance before making a move. The Sigma male refuses that trap. He doesn't volunteer to be anyone's emotional crutch, and he won't spoon-feed confidence. If someone wants to collapse under pressure, he lets them. If they expect constant validation, they'll be disappointed. At first, this can make him seem cold, detached, even harsh. But over time, people realize something uncomfortable. His refusal to babysit forces them to grow. Without hand-holding, they have no choice but to solve problems on their own. Without constant approval, they learn to trust their own judgment. The absence of mollycoddling feels brutal in the moment, but it builds resilience that no comforting speech ever could. And when people finally overcome a challenge without him holding their hand, they look back and realize the Sigma gave them the one thing every other leader denied them: independence. That's why his influence hits harder. He doesn't build followers who cling to him. He builds people who can stand beside him. And ironically, that's what earns him the deepest respect. Those who once resented his distance end up crediting him for their growth, because while others coddled them into weakness, he left them no option but to sharpen themselves. The Sigma knows leadership isn't about being liked, it's about creating strength. He would rather be called cold and see someone become stronger than be called caring while keeping them fragile. And that hard truth is what sets him apart. By rejecting the babysitter role, he avoids the trap that drains most leaders and instead creates something lasting. People who don't just follow him, but evolve because of him. That's leadership stripped of comfort and ego. And it's why Sigmas lead without ever trying. True leadership has nothing to do with chasing followers, shouting orders, or wearing a crown. What sets the Sigma male apart is that he never runs after the role at all. While others fight to be recognized as leaders, he dismantles the noise, moves in silence, and builds something so real that people can't help but align with it. He doesn't manipulate emotions, beg for consensus, or play babysitter to fragile egos. Instead, he embodies clarity, sets rhythms others unconsciously follow, withholds energy until it matters, and quietly creates alternatives so effective they replace the old without a fight. That's why his influence feels different. It isn't forced, it isn't noisy, and it isn't built on the fragile need to be adored. It's built on truth, strength, and results. And when people finally step back, they realize he led them all along. Not by trying, but by simply being unshakably himself. If this breakdown opened your eyes to the quiet dominance of Sigma males, don't just leave it here. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and share it with someone who needs to see this. Because this is only the surface. There's so much more to uncover about the Sigma way. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.